The rhythmic splash of water against the worn edge of the diving board was the only consistent companion to Kaylin Riley's early mornings. Long before the sun kissed the eastern skyline, painting the sky in soft hues of rose and gold, she was at the local public pool, a silent, determined figure. The chill of the pre-dawn air would prickle her skin as she adjusted the straps of her prosthetic leg, a sleek, custom-fitted piece of carbon fiber and titanium that hummed quietly with every flex. It was more than a medical device. It was an extension of her will, a testament to her unyielding spirit. Her form, honed by years of relentless practice, was a study in fluid precision, each muscle memory a whisper of dedication. She would ascend the high dive platform, a solitary sentinel against the vast, empty ceiling, and launch herself into the air. The arc of her body, the dizzying rotations, the almost imperceptible micro-adjustments of her prosthetic limb, mid-air. Each movement was practiced until it was seamless, until the entry was a whisper, a mere rip in the water's surface, leaving barely a ripple. Her life outside the pool was a quiet testament to her perseverance. Physical therapy sessions were a constant, grueling reminder of the body's limits and its astonishing capacity for adaptation. Her small apartment, though meticulously kept, reflected a life stripped down to essentials, devoid of luxuries, yet imbued with a profound sense of purpose. Friends were few, mostly other dedicated athletes or her kind, elderly landlord, who often left a warm thermos of tea by her door on particularly cold mornings. She didn't seek accolades or the roar of the crowd. The perfect dive, the internal satisfaction of pushing her own boundaries, was its own reward. One particularly blustery Saturday, as Kaylin was finishing her routine, a young boy, no older than 7, tentatively approached the shallow end. He clutched a bright yellow kickboard, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination as he watched the older swimmers launch themselves into the deeper end. His instructor, busy with a group of boisterous teenagers, hadn't noticed his growing anxiety. Kaylin, catching the boy's trembling lower lip and darting glances at the intimidating diving boards, quietly retrieved a smaller, less daunting board from the storage room. She knelt beside him, her voice soft. "Hey there, champ," she murmured. "Sometimes the biggest jumps start with the smallest steps." She demonstrated a simple, graceful seated dive from the very edge of the pool, her prosthetic leg seamlessly bending with the movement. She offered him a patient, encouraging smile, spending 10 quiet minutes guiding him through the simple motion until his initial fear transformed into a tentative, joyful splash. She didn't wait for thanks. A small, relieved smile on the boy's face was enough. She simply gathered her gear, her inherent compassion and understanding of overcoming physical challenges demonstrated in that small, anonymous act. This was Kaylin's quiet, save the cat moment, a testament to her intrinsic goodness that fostered immediate reader empathy. Kaylin's diving technique was, to put it mildly, unorthodox. While other elite divers focused on sheer power and textbook form, Kaylin's strength lay in a unique blend of adaptive precision and an almost ethereal grace. During her rotations, there was a specific, almost imperceptible twist she added, a micro-adjustment of her prosthetic limb that allowed for an astonishing degree of control and a lightning-fast snap into position before entry. To the untrained eye, it might look like a slight awkwardness, a compensation for her disability. Coaches at local meets sometimes remarked on it, urging her to iron out that little hitch or conform to standard mechanics. They didn't understand that this hitch was precisely what gave her an edge, allowing her to generate a rotational speed and a stability that traditional divers could only dream of. She had a peculiar habit of closing her eyes for a fleeting second mid-air, a moment of profound internal calibration, as if listening to an unseen rhythm before the final perfect plunge. She wasn't just executing dives, she was reinterpreting them, her mind forging links between biomechanics and physics that others missed. This unusual method of processing and executing her dives, a subtle hint at her groundbreaking potential and unconventional insights, sowed the seeds of mystery, laying the groundwork for the later revelation of her truly revolutionary technique. The quiet hum of Kaylin's disciplined life, a delicate symphony of self-directed training and silent self-improvement, was about to be shattered by a discordant note of public humiliation. The instrument of this disruption was none other than Judge Theron Blackwell, a man whose name was practically synonymous with Olympic diving itself. Blackwell was a figure of immense authority, revered for his stringent adherence to the sport's foundational principles and his unyielding commitment to what he deemed classic form. He exuded an air of almost aristocratic precision, his judgments delivered with an unshakable certainty, his gaze often sweeping over the pool as if daring any athlete to deviate from his exacting standards. The catalyst for Kaelin's forced emergence came during the highly anticipated National Olympic qualifying event, a crucible where dreams were forged or shattered. Kaelin, despite her usual aversion to the spotlight, had felt a quiet confidence blooming within her. She had meticulously perfected her dives, including the particularly challenging 10-meter platform reverse 3.5 somersault, a dive that integrated her unique adaptive twist, turning what for others was a struggle into an elegant, controlled sequence. She had felt the familiar rush of the air, the perfect execution of her rotations, and the satisfying rip as she entered the water, believing she had met the exacting standards. As Kaelin emerged from the water, the scores for her final dive flashed on the immense scoreboard. Her breath hitched. The numbers from the other judges, while not perfect, were respectable, placing her well within contention. But Judge Blackwell's score, prominently displayed, was an outlier, a shockingly low 4.5. A collective murmur rippled through the spectators, a ripple that grew into a confused buzz. Then, over the stadium's loudspeakers, Blackwell's voice, amplified and chillingly clear, cut through the air. "Ms. Riley," he announced, his tone dripping with condescension, "while your effort is commendable, your technique demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of classic diving form. The unnecessary and unorthodox movements, presumably compensations, detract significantly from the aesthetic purity and integrity of the sport. We cannot compromise the Olympic standard." He paused, allowing his words to hang in the air, his lips curling into a faint, superior smile. "Such deviations," he continued, gesturing vaguely towards her, "are simply not what we define as elite diving." The snickers from some of the other divers, particularly those who adhered rigidly to traditional forms and vied for Blackwell's approval, felt like physical blows. This public shaming, specifically tailored to highlight her perceived physical deficiency and unorthodoxy in front of her peers, the media, and the national committee, profoundly impacted Kaelin's Olympic standing and personal dignity, a sting she felt deep in her soul. Kaelin's initial reaction was a familiar mix of shame and acute embarrassment. Her cheeks flushed, and her hands, clutching the edge of the pool, trembled almost imperceptibly. Her prosthetic leg suddenly felt heavy, cumbersome, a glaring symbol of her difference rather than her strength. Her first instinct was to retreat, to disappear into the anonymity of the locker room, to bury herself in solitary training, and never again venture an original movement. The very ground beneath her feet seemed to sway, her carefully constructed world of quiet athletic pursuit crumbling under the weight of Blackwell's scathing dismissal. However, as Judge Blackwell continued his pontification, his voice booming with unshakable conviction about the unassailable purity of traditional diving, a different emotion began to stir within Kaelin. Indignation. Not just for herself, but for every adaptive athlete, for every innovative spirit he sought to suppress. She knew, with an almost visceral certainty, that her technique, however unconventional, held a deeper, more elegant truth about human potential than Blackwell's increasingly rigid definitions. His harsh, absolute dismissal, laced with an intellectual arrogance that bordered on contempt, ignited a spark of fierce, defiant conviction within her. It awakened a dormant competitive courage, a desperate, quiet need to validate her unique insights, not for ego, but for the sake of the truth itself, for the evolution of the sport. The quiet, analytical part of her mind, usually so serene, now pulsed with a nascent, righteous fire. Judge Blackwell, perhaps sensing the subtle shift in Kaelin's posture, or simply reveling in his perceived victory, took a further, more damaging action. 2 days after the qualifying event, a notice was circulated among the national coaching staff, announcing a special, closed-door review of Olympic judging criteria and the maintenance of athletic purity. The implied target was clear. Simultaneously, Kaelin received a terse email informing her that her provisional spot on the Olympic team, tenuous after Blackwell's score, had been placed under review due to a perceived divergence from established foundational principles. It was a death knell to her Olympic prospects, a clear message that her adaptive and unconventional thinking had blacklisted her. He even gave a high-profile interview to a leading sports magazine, subtly criticizing the increasing trend of unconventional interpretations that threatened to dilute the very essence of competitive integrity. He didn't mention Kaylin by name, but the message was clear to anyone following the sport. This concrete, undeniable act of intellectual and athletic suppression forced Kaylin to a point of no return. She stared at the review notice, her vision blurring not from tears, but from a cold, unwavering resolve. She could not simply continue her quiet training, hoping for a miracle. Blackwell had made sure of that. She had to actively confront the established paradigm, and by extension, the judge himself, knowing that her entire athletic future, her ability to compete, and the very validity of her unique approach were now irrevocably at stake. Her athletic vindication, she realized, was no longer a quiet aspiration. It was an unavoidable battle. She would either prove her truth or be condemned to athletic obscurity. The sting of Judge Blackwell's public dismissal and the chilling finality of the review notice fueled a quiet, desperate fire within Kaylin. Olympic obscurity loomed, a vast, silent void threatening to swallow her athletic dreams whole. But within that despair, a defiant resolve solidified. She would not be silenced. She would not abandon the truth she felt simmering beneath the surface of established techniques. Driven by an urgency that bypassed sleep and proper meals, Kaylin retreated deeper into her training. She meticulously refined her unconventional adaptive technique, the one Blackwell had so casually derided. Her focus narrowed to a seemingly intractable problem that traditional divers struggled with due to sheer rotational speed and the precise control required for the most difficult dives, the forward 4.5 somersault with a full twist. For many, it was a high-risk, high-reward maneuver, often resulting in splashes or over-rotations. Kaylin's unique micro-adjustment of her prosthetic and her precise body tension, however, offered a path to a control that seemed almost impossible within the standard framework. In the late hours of the High Performance Training Center's auxiliary pool, after the competitive teams had long since departed, Kaylin traced the intricate biomechanics of the dive. She reviewed slow-motion footage of her previous attempts, a peculiar blend of minute movements and abstract, almost artistic interpretations of force and torque. She recalled her habit of feeling the subtle currents in the water, the almost imperceptible shifts in air pressure as she launched, the delicate balance required to maintain a perfect line. What if the human body, in its grand complexity, operated not on the rigid, linear principles Blackwell championed, but on a more fluid, interconnected, almost organic logic, enhanced by adaptive technology? What if the key lay not in forced conformity, but in embracing an inherent elegant interplay between athlete and equipment? A profound moment of quiet breakthrough struck her one pre-dawn morning. As she experimented with a slightly different entry angle, her mind unconsciously connecting it to the unique rotation her prosthetic allowed, a crucial, elegant solution clicked into place. The missing variable in traditional diving, the anomaly in many high-difficulty attempts, wasn't a flaw in the dive itself. It was an oversight in the understanding of kinetic energy transfer and adaptive control. Her refined technique proposed that the prosthetic, rather than being a limitation, could be leveraged as a propulsive and stabilizing element through subtle, counter-rotational forces, creating an almost gyroscope-like effect in mid-air. This allowed for an astonishingly fast but incredibly stable rotation, ensuring a clean entry where others faltered. She wasn't showing off or deliberately trying to disprove Blackwell. She was simply following the truth wherever it led, compelled by athletic honesty and her unyielding pursuit of perfection. This was the unwilling revelation of her groundbreaking insight, a quiet, profound discovery made in the solitude of her relentless pursuit. Only one person inadvertently witnessed a glimpse of this breakthrough. Coach Lena Petrova, a seasoned national coach known for her open-mindedness and a quiet disdain for the rigid, sometimes stagnant traditionalism of judges like Blackwell, was an early bird, often observing morning practices. She had frequently seen Kaylin, head bowed over her analysis tablets, an aura of intense concentration about her. On this particular morning, as Kaylin furiously executed dive after dive, her usual quiet intensity had escalated into a palpable, almost frantic excitement. Coach Petrova, drawn by the unusual energy, quietly approached the edge of the pool. She didn't speak, but her presence was felt. Kaylin, looking up, her eyes wide with the thrill of discovery, instinctively demonstrated the final, almost imperceptible micro-adjustment she made just before entry. Coach Petrova, with a seasoned eye, recognized the audacious athletic leaps being made. She picked up a stopwatch, her brow furrowed in concentration, then widened in dawning comprehension. That snap, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. That's not just compensation, Kaylin. That's propulsion. Kaylin, initially hesitant, was subtly coaxed into a brief, probing discussion, her words tumbling out in a rush of explanation about the counter-rotational forces and the prosthetics role. Coach Petrova listened, utterly astonished, sensing a profound, paradigm-shifting insight that stretched the boundaries of competitive diving. She knew, with a certainty that thrilled her, that she was witnessing the birth of something truly revolutionary. Judge Blackwell, meanwhile, remained utterly oblivious, basking in the perceived safety of his established judging criteria, convinced his traditional views were unimpeachable. Judge Blackwell, indeed, was preparing to reinforce his traditional dominance. Unaware of the quiet revolution brewing in the training pool, and perhaps fueled by a lingering insecurity regarding Kaylin's quiet defiance, he actively doubled down on his established criteria. He announced a new, highly anticipated article, co-authored with his most senior protégés, titled "Preserving the Purity: Why Classic Form Must Prevail in Olympic Diving." It was set to be published in Olympic Review, the most prestigious sports journal, presented with great fanfare at the upcoming International Olympic Committee conference. He also scheduled a series of high-profile public interviews, each one designed to solidify his legacy and dismiss any deviant techniques. During a national committee meeting, he even made a thinly veiled comment about the dangers of unconventional approaches, clouding the clarity of established athletic standards, his gaze pointedly lingering on the records of adaptive athletes. His actions further solidified his role as the Type A villain antagonist, driven by traditional bias and a profound, almost pathological fear of change. He was actively seeking to maintain his dominance and discredit any challenge to his life's work, even before fully comprehending its nature. His discrimination against Kaylin had escalated into a public, professional campaign against her athletic integrity, setting the stage for a dramatic, inevitable clash. Judge Blackwell's relentless campaign to solidify his traditionalist views and preemptively quash any deviant techniques reached its crescendo with the announcement of the Olympic trials. This wasn't merely a preliminary competition, it was the ultimate proving ground, a grand stage where he annually reaffirmed his status as the sport's unyielding guardian of classic form. This year, it was specifically billed as the platform to showcase the unblemished purity of diving, subtly implying a weeding out of any unconventional approaches. The trial's main event, the final round of the 10-meter platform dive, was precisely the symbolic arena Kaylin knew she had to enter. It was the heart of Blackwell's influence, the very stage where her technique had been dismissed, and now where it must unequivocally rise. The tension in the vast Olympic Aquatics Center was thick, a mixture of anticipation for the world-class performances and a palpable unspoken curiosity about the unorthodox divers Blackwell had so vehemently denounced. The Aquatics Center buzzed with an air of immense pressure and expectation. Elite athletes from across the nation mingled, their hushed conversations punctuated by the echoing splashes from the warm-up pools. Judge Blackwell, impeccably dressed in a pristine white suit, radiated an aura of unshakable conviction as he greeted fellow judges and influential committee members, accepting their deferential nods and praise with practiced ease. He moved through the crowd like a monarch among his loyal subjects, his gaze often lingering on the monitors displaying the divers' past scores, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of the pool. In this formidable arena, Kaylin stood largely alone. Coach Lena Petrova, her helper, was indeed present, sitting discreetly in the coaches section, her gaze fixed on Kaylin with a mixture of quiet encouragement and palpable anxiety. A few younger athletes, emboldened by whispers of Kaylin's groundbreaking training and the unique fluidity of her recent dives, offered hesitant smiles and nods from the warm-up areas, but none dared to openly challenge Blackwell's looming presence. The athletic battle was solely Kaylin's. She carried the weight of her months of solitary adaptive training, the intricate biomechanics, the unconventional micro-adjustments, all distilled into a single undeniable truth about human potential. She had to execute her complex, groundbreaking dive against the overwhelming weight of Judge Blackwell's entrenched reputation, his rigid traditionalism, and the ingrained skepticism of the elite athletic establishment. Her only weapons were her raw athletic brilliance, her meticulous preparation, and her unwavering conviction in her truth. She clutched her towel, damp from warm-up, her mind already on the perfectly aligned entry that would define her career. The time pressure was excruciating, a relentless drumbeat in Kaylin's ears. The previous diver, a young prodigy favored by Blackwell, had just completed a technically strong but slightly splashy dive, receiving scores that were higher than expected, creating an even greater gap for Kaylin to bridge. Judge Blackwell, now seated at the head of the judging panel, adjusted his glasses, his stern gaze sweeping across the platform. He leaned into his microphone, his voice resonating through the stadium. "Our next diver," he announced, a subtle, almost imperceptible emphasis on the word next, "will attempt the forward 4.5 somersault with a full twist. This dive, while challenging, demands the utmost adherence to classic form and unblemished execution. We expect nothing less than the purest demonstration of athletic artistry." His words were a thinly veiled warning, implicitly raising the bar for Kaylin, emphasizing the very criteria he used to disadvantage her. On the live broadcast, a prominent sportscaster, Mr. Douglas "Doug" Finch, a man known for his booming voice and his almost reverent admiration for classic diving, began to comment. "And here's Kaylin Riley, a remarkable story certainly, overcoming significant challenges. But this dive, folks, the 4.5 with a full, it's about sheer explosive power and textbook rotation. Her previous scores have been a bit inconsistent, particularly with the entry. It'll be a true test to see if she can maintain the purity that Judge Blackwell just spoke of, given her unique adaptive style." His voice dripped with skepticism, subtly cementing the narrative of Kaylin's perceived limitations and the unorthodoxy of her technique, completely unaware of the revolutionary feat she was about to perform. This was it. Kaylin had a narrow, self-imposed window, mere seconds, to initiate her dive, to execute her complex maneuver, and to fundamentally challenge the sport's core premise before Judge Blackwell's authority became insurmountable. The audacity of her impending feat to such an entrenched figure, a man who had shaped the very sport she now sought to redefine, was dizzying. The tension in the hall mounted with every skeptical word Doug Finch uttered. The dramatic irony was palpable, almost suffocating. The thousands of spectators in the audience, the esteemed coaches, the rival athletes, and Judge Blackwell himself were utterly oblivious to the seismic athletic shift that was about to occur. They were watching a dive, anticipating a familiar outcome, a good effort perhaps, but one that would ultimately confirm their preconceived notions. They were listening to the swan song of an old paradigm, completely unaware that a quiet athlete, standing on the precipice of the 10-meter platform, was about to unleash a new, revolutionary understanding of human potential, one that would dismantle the very foundations of Judge Blackwell's life's work. Kaylin took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the shimmering water below. Her moment, the moment of truth, was upon her. Judge Blackwell's voice, resonant with the authority of decades, filled the Grand Aquatics Center. On the immense screen above the diving pool, replays of previous divers, all adhering to what he considered classic form, glowed, seemingly unassailable. He concluded his segment on the importance of traditional technique with a definitive nod, declaring it the immutable standard, achievable only through disciplined adherence to established principles. A wave of murmurs, then polite applause, rippled through the esteemed audience. This was the crescendo of his intellectual empire, and for a moment, the weight of it threatened to crush Kaylin. The air crackled with the triumph of established dogma. This was the bated breath moment for Kaylin. Everything seemed to go wrong, her vital truth seemingly drowned out by the noise and the pervasive acceptance of Blackwell's pronouncements. Just as Judge Blackwell turned to acknowledge the applause, his hand already reaching for a glass of water, Kaylin acted. Her name had just been announced, a distant echo through the cavernous space. Her movements on the 10-meter platform were deliberate, each step perfectly placed. She stood at the edge, poised, a solitary figure against the vast blue backdrop of the pool. She took a deep, steadying breath, her focus absolute. Then she launched. The ascent was fluid, astonishingly fast. Her body unfurled from the platform, a testament to years of grueling training. The rotation began, precise and powerful. The crowd, initially murmuring with anticipation, fell silent, their eyes fixed on her. This was the forward 4.5 somersault with a full twist, a dive renowned for its difficulty. As she spun, faster than many had ever seen, the subtle, almost invisible twist she added, the micro-adjustment of her prosthetic limb, became evident. It wasn't a hitch or a compensation. It was a revolutionary, almost propulsive snap, creating an unprecedented level of stability mid-air. Her body, aided by this unique technique, seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Then came the bated breath moment. Judge Blackwell, initially scoffing, his arms crossed, anticipated a splash, a slight over-rotation, a flaw that would confirm his biases. Sportscaster Doug Finch, on the live broadcast, was mid-sentence, ready to deliver a critical remark about the difficulty of her adaptive technique. "She's rotating incredibly fast," he boomed. "But can she stick the entry? That's always been the crucial—" Before he could finish, Kaylin's body, a blur of controlled motion, snapped into position. She sliced through the water with an impossibly small splash, a rip entry so perfect it created a momentary vacuum, leaving behind barely a ripple. The sound, or rather the lack of sound, was deafening in its perfection. The impact was so clean, so precise, that it resonated not as a splash, but as a silent, profound declaration. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Doug Finch's voice died in his throat, replaced by a choked gasp. He stared at the monitor, his face a mask of utter bewilderment, then dawning comprehension. My God," he whispered, his booming voice reduced to an incredulous murmur. Judge Blackwell's face contorted. The arrogance drained from him, leaving behind a pallor of utter intellectual and professional devastation. His eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, glazed over as he stared at the scoreboard. The numbers flashed, a string of perfect tens. The crowd, initially stunned into silence, erupted. A collective gasp swept through the hall, followed by an electrifying pause, and then a rising tide of sound, swelling into a thunderous standing ovation. It was not merely for Kaylin, but for the profound truth she had unveiled. Professor Anya Sharma, a renowned biomechanics expert from the crowd, was already on her feet, her mouth agape in awe, a look of profound intellectual revelation spreading across her face. Coach Lena Petrova, in the coaches section, clenched her fists, tears silently streaming down her face, a mix of pride and vindication. Kaylin, emerging from the water, looked up at the scoreboard, then out at the roaring crowd. Her face, usually so composed, broke into a rare, triumphant smile. Judge Blackwell, once the undisputed titan, sagged in his chair, his public unraveling complete. The crowd's transition from skepticism to overwhelming astonishment, then to a roaring recognition of Kaylin's brilliance, confirmed her athletic victory as a profound public vindication of truth, courage, and the triumph of groundbreaking innovation over entrenched prejudice. She had not just won gold, she had fundamentally changed the sport forever. The thunderous standing ovation for Kaylin, still echoing through the vast Olympic Aquatics Center, was a death knell for Judge Blackwell's once unassailable authority. He sat slumped in his chair, a broken man amidst the wreckage of his rigid doctrines, the triumphant roar of Kaylin's athletic revolution deafening him. The cameras, once focused on his austere pronouncements, now swiveled to capture the beaming athlete who had dismantled his empire with a single, elegant dive. Judge Blackwell's downfall was swift and absolute. Within hours, The Olympic Committee, reeling from the undeniable evidence and the public outcry, reacted with furious urgency. His scores for Kaelin's dive were immediately and publicly overturned by an emergency review board, citing blatant bias and a prejudicial interpretation of established criteria. He faced immediate and severe backlash from the media, outraged athletes, and powerful disability advocacy groups who had long endured his subtle discrimination. Within days, he was stripped of all his judging privileges, removed from every influential committee, and his long-standing legacy was forever marred by his prejudice and the irrefutable proof of his error. He vanished from public life, an athletic pariah, losing all that he had valued, his authority, his reputation, his control over the sport's purity, to the undeniable truth Kaelin had unveiled. His pride, the very engine of his ambition, had consumed him, leaving only professional ruin in its wake. For Kaelin, the world shifted from the dim glow of early morning practice to the blinding brilliance of global recognition. The Olympic Committee, eager to align itself with the new era of inclusivity, not only confirmed her Olympic gold medal, but also appointed her to a newly created, high-profile position on the International Olympic Diving Federation, tasked specifically with revising judging criteria to embrace and encourage adaptive techniques. She was no longer burdened by financial worries or the suffocating constraints of athletic marginalization. Her modest apartment was exchanged for opportunities to travel the world, consulting on cutting-edge prosthetic research and speaking to packed stadiums. She was given complete intellectual and athletic freedom, the resources to pursue her innovative techniques to their fullest, and the autonomy to shape the future of her sport. Her former struggles transformed into a position of profound influence and athletic leadership. A few weeks after the trials, Kaelin sat with coach Lena Petrova, her helper, by the edge of the now-quiet training pool. The late afternoon sun dappled through the glass ceiling, casting shifting patterns on the water. "You know, Kaelin," Coach Petrova began, a warm smile on her face. "When I saw that snap, that micro-adjustment in your dives, I knew it was special. But even I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what you'd found. It's a revolution. You didn't just win gold, you changed the sport forever." Kaelin dipped her fingers into the cool water, tracing a pattern on the surface. "It was always there, Coach. The potential, the physics. Blackwell just couldn't see it because it didn't fit his predefined world of what a diver should be. His ego blinded him. And your courage," Coach Petrova added, her voice soft but firm. "To stand up there, alone, against decades of entrenched thought, that's as profound as your genius. Many brilliant athletes get silenced because they lack that courage, or the platform." Their reflective dialogue, though brief, encapsulated the intricate journey they had shared, the unexpected twists of athletic discovery, and the profound lessons learned about the nature of truth, the dangers of rigid adherence to dogma, and the bravery it takes to challenge established norms. "It makes me wonder," Coach Petrova mused, looking out at the shimmering water. "How many other impossible feats are waiting to be achieved? How many other potentials are being missed because we're too set in our ways?" Kaelin looked out at the tranquil pool, a subtle shift in her posture reflecting her journey from a quiet, overlooked athlete to a recognized pioneer. "The human spirit is always whispering its secrets, Coach," she replied, a thoughtful glint in her eyes. "We just have to be willing to listen, even when the whispers challenge everything we think we know." Her words, simple yet profound, resonated with the quiet strength she had discovered within herself, marking not just the resolution of a conflict, but the dawn of a new era of open inquiry and boundless athletic exploration. 5 years later, the scent of chlorine still clung faintly to Kaelin Riley, but now it mingled with the crisp, clean air of a state-of-the-art aquatic training facility she herself had helped design. Gone were the dim, worn public pools. In their place, gleaming lanes stretched beneath soaring glass ceilings, alive with the splashes of young athletes. Her once solitary training regimen was a distant memory, replaced by a vibrant coaching schedule, guiding a new generation of divers, some with adaptive equipment, others without. Kaelin, once a quiet, overlooked athlete, was now a revered Olympic champion and a leading voice in adaptive sports. Her interdimensional dive, as some sports scientists playfully called her revolutionary technique, forming the cornerstone of a new athletic paradigm. Kaylin was deeply committed to paying it forward. She understood the quiet despair of being marginalized, the burning frustration of having potential dismissed. She founded the Kaylin Riley Adaptive Sports Foundation, an annual fund that provided grants for cutting-edge prosthetic research tailored for athletes and offered scholarships for disabled youth to pursue competitive sports at all levels. She ensured these aspiring athletes had the financial freedom and expert coaching she had so desperately yearned for. Her mentorship program, The Catalysts of Change, actively sought out young divers from diverse backgrounds, fostering an environment where daring techniques and unorthodox approaches were celebrated, not suppressed. She frequently gave public lectures, not just on her Olympic journey, but on the importance of defying perceived limitations, advocating for inclusivity, and the necessity of questioning established norms, her calm voice carrying a powerful message that resonated far beyond the confines of the athletic world. On a warm spring afternoon, Kaylin stood by the edge of the main competition pool at a newly inaugurated National Training Center, gazing up at a majestic bronze statue. It depicted her mid-dive, perfectly executing her revolutionary forward 4.5 somersault with a full twist, her prosthetic limb captured in the precise, almost imperceptible micro-adjustment that had redefined the dive. Below the statue, a diverse group of young divers, some with prosthetics that mirrored Kaylin's, others with the natural grace of unencumbered limbs, practiced their forms. Their movements, even the traditional ones, subtly incorporated the fluid principles Kaylin had introduced. A testament to the lasting impact of her innovation, she turned to a group of her Catalysts students, their eyes alight with the same quiet passion that had driven her through countless lonely mornings. "This dive," she said, gesturing towards the immortalized form above them, "was once considered impossible, or at least fundamentally flawed by some. It challenged everything we thought we knew about balance, rotation, and entry. But the human body, especially when paired with ingenuity and determination, doesn't care about our preconceptions. It simply is." She smiled, a profound, knowing smile. Our task, as athletes, as innovators, isn't to force ourselves into rigid definitions, but to listen to our own capabilities, to push the boundaries of what's possible, no matter how uncomfortable or revolutionary it may seem. The interdimensional dive, now a standard, albeit incredibly difficult maneuver in elite diving, was not merely a sequence of movements. It was a symbol of the profound shift she had brought about, a beacon of human potential illuminating a new path for athletic understanding. Kaylin stood at the nexus of a thriving, inclusive athletic community, no longer confined to the back of the pool, but a guiding light. She had not only proven a prejudiced judge wrong, but in doing so had opened up an entirely new dimension of human achievement, proving that even the most quiet and unassuming spirits can echo with the loudest truths, perpetually seeking the next uncharted frontier of what the body and spirit can achieve. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.